Okay, so turning the question on to, so what can somebody do? And I'm looking at two personas over here, the CISO and then the people in the supply chain, aka the vendors, hardware and software, right? So again, this is free form. Anybody can go first. Is what can and should a CISO do right now if they have to evaluate and if they have to report to the board saying, hey, what's our risk level right now, number one. And number two, from a vendor's perspective, is there some introspection as well as process changes that a vendor needs to do, given that they are a key component of this in this whole equation?
Yeah, I can start because I've been doing a lot of assessments lately. And I think that one of the things that a lot of companies that both the CISOs, that they really miss is inventory and truly inventorying and understand how do you know what your supply chain is if you don't have a good inventory. So that starts with the hardware. who made the hardware, how do you source it, and it even goes to some minor things that organizations may not think about, like the USB sticks. You may say, yeah, it's okay, we're not one of those companies that pours glue on our USB ports, or it's like all USB-C anyway now. But you're allowed to use them, but which suppliers are you allowed to use? And have you even thought about at that level? Even sometimes, the USB hubs, right? Do you understand who makes the hardware? Starting as simple as that, what software is in use, and not just what's being allowed to be downloaded, but also where you allow your people to go and where you allow them to put information, whether it's a SaaS environment, for example, which platforms can they develop on in a PaaS environment? So there's a whole lot of things to think about in terms of inventory and how that all intersects into organizations. And quite frankly, a lot of companies don't have a handle on all of the data, all of the pieces, all of the inventory that make up their total supply chain. So starting there, it's not just about your partners. It's not just about knowing who your HVAC vendor is. It's really a very comprehensive across the organization. So I would start with inventory. I know there's more, but I'm going to let other people speak.
Just to sort of tag along to, Diana, right? The scope of your CISO role is not just your assets, right? But it's also your partner ecosystem, right? A lot of manufacturing companies have outsourced manufacturers, partner manufacturers. Even among your employees, you have BYOD, people working from home. We see an increased attack vector, people, their extended families sort of working from home. So almost you got to say my superset of my devices are all the devices that are there in the house, all the devices that are there outside in a partner ecosystem. And you got to almost protect all of those in order to be secure, right? I mean, if you just put your hand around, okay, only what I own, I will secure, that almost gives you a false sense of hope, right? And I think the other piece is, I think the CISO needs to closely partner with the application organization on DevSecOps, right? DevSecOps is a cultural shift, right? You almost have to be as agile, partner in the agile process with the application development teams. It's not a sequential process, right? And identify these possible security, vulnerabilities or security gaps or potential gaps, even before application development is done. I think both these together will sort of help you assess risk and mitigate risk, even as and when you sort of identify it. And you, on the other side, on your devices side, you sort of use risk as your superset, not the subset. I think these are two key areas that I would sort of highlight.
To kind of add to that from a vendor perspective, and I'm going to just use SolarWinds as an example. For the Fortune 500s that were breached, let's assume they had certain level of security measures in place from a third-party risk perspective. And I'm going to guess, what they had, I think I can say this pretty confidently, that they had some sort of risk assessment in place for initial vendor risk assessment for looking at inherent risk. I'm sure they're contractually set up to know, hey, right to audit, breach disclosures, holding them accountable, et cetera, et cetera. But again, what can they do more of? I mean, mean, again, you mentioned the board earlier. I think this needs to be a board imperative that the CISO is pushing every single time at a board level from a corporate reputation perspective. Number one, educate your C-level on third-party risk, and not just look at third parties, but also look at fourth parties. And this goes into due diligence. The due diligence piece has to be from a not the, I did the initial assessment, I'm good. No, there needs to be, look at your critical vendors and look at doing continuous monitoring, for example, of not just your third parties, but also your fourth parties, monitor, digital places like the dark web, for example, just doing research, for example, during this time for this panel, I came from intel that there was someone selling SolarWinds system back in 2017. So if I am a potential customer who's evaluating tools like SolarWinds, if I would have had this information, let's say, I don't know, in 2018, and I decided not to go, hire SolarWinds as my provider, that would have made a big difference of whether I could end up in the front page of New York Times or not. So I think that's one of the really key aspects that we really need to focus on. Looking from the outside in, having an intelligence approach is what the CISO needs to focus on. And then on the vendor side, because I can speak from a security vendor perspective, we need to hold each other accountable at the same security measures our customers are holding us accountable. That goes into alliances. We're integrating data with each other while we're trying to come up with the whole product for our clients. And that's great. We certainly want to do that because we want to bring automation, scalability for our clients, but at the same time, we're also increasing the risk. So holding us accountable and then holding the vendors that we work with, our third, fourth parties accountable for the same security measures that you have in place is very critical for the CISO.
If you go all the way down to the core of this, you also need to consider how is your vendor organization protecting their DevOps environment? Because in the SolarWinds case, they got all the way into the build server, which means they had to traverse the entire SolarWinds network. And that's one thing I've been writing about lately is whose responsibility is it to protect the DevOps environment inside the enterprise software development agencies, third and fourth tier down. So we're looking at things like get easy to guess passwords, which is what happened in the SolarWinds case. I mean, that was a no-brainer. Are there other ways you can secure the DevOps environment and really get the buy-in from the developers that they are the ones that are now under attack? This is not just some hypothetical thing that they need to worry about anymore. So in addition to the secure coding practices that everybody brought up for DevSecOps, their actual environments need to be safe and secure. Then you're looking at the software bill of materials and the digital bill of materials, which is what all three of you have been speaking about. That has to be automated so that every piece of code that's involved in a larger enterprise software package has a digital bill of materials with it, a software bill of materials with it that says, these are the 3 vulnerabilities that we know are in this software. Now it's up to you to figure out what to do about them, but at least we have a list of what is wrong. There's a lot of work on this front. Some security vendors, like the DevSecOps vendors, actually plug now into a DBOM when they do a binary scan against the code, for example. So watch for those things to come up because those have to be fed all the way up to the CISO level so the CISOs understand what components they're using, what the overall risk of those components are, and how those apply to the enterprise they're using them in. And I think that will help a lot because I think trying to track this on your own as a CISO would be impossible. Think about the amount of code in every enterprise. Think about the third party and the fourth party code. All of those use components from software libraries, which are now under attack. So I see this going all the way to the core of the issue. Something we should have done 20 years ago is finally being forced.